Hello, my fellow horror enthusiasts. Welcome to another installment in the Creepypasta Chronicles, the series where in each video, I take you on a dive into a specific creepypasta, well-known or otherwise. The pasta I am about to cover is one that I am not too familiar with. In fact, I only just found out about it being a creepypasta. It is the story of Ted the Caver. I will admit that I have definitely seen this online before, mentioned in YouTube videos and some images associated with it, but I have never actually read anything related to the pasta itself. So this is as new for me as it may be for some of you. Let's cut the chatter and get right into it. So, grab your spelunking gear, suit up, and get ready to explore the mystery cave. Don't actually do this, it's just a metaphor. Just sit back and enjoy. According to Know Your Meme, the highest tier source for all things creepypasta, I know, Ted the Caver is a creepypasta story that originally appeared as a series of blog posts written by a supposed spelunker named Ted. The posts recounted his exploration of a so-called mystery cave in March of 2001. Ted made a page on a site called Angel Fire, which he used as an avenue for detailing his caving journal in an online setting. This fact makes Ted the Caver the oldest creepypasta covered in this series yet. Even nuttier than that is that the posts were detailing events that had taken place in December of 2000 and earlier, so over 20 years ago. The details of these posts will all be revealed when I read the proper creepypasta later in this video. The blog itself abruptly ended on May 19th of 2001. Fun fact, this is exactly 18 years before I graduated college to the date. But anyway, this abrupt end had come right after Ted detailed a 3-week period of time after his last visit to the cave. Apparently, Ted and some of his buddies who explored with him were experiencing all kinds of spooky phenomena, which are described in the pasta. Ted had told his online readers that he was going to go for one last trip in the cave to get closure. He never made a return post, however, leaving the saga unconcluded. The defunct blog gained its first notoriety via discussion on the National Speleological Society's message board in November of 2004. In the relevant thread, a poster named Ralph Powers stated he knew Ted in real life and had visited the mystery cave with him. Trying to bring some rational thought to the conversation, Powers claimed that the cave system ran underneath an interstate highway, with the overhead traffic possibly causing some of the noises Ted heard. Later on in this same thread, in January of 2006, a poster named Caverdale confirmed Powers' theory. He revealed that this mystery cave is actually known as the Interstate Cave, which is located in Utah. There is even a full-blown map plotting most of the cave system. Between the years 2006 and 2011, this whole situation was hotly shared and discussed on message boards, including Snopes, Straight Dope, Bodybuilding, and Face Punch. As one might expect, people were enamored, and back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, fact-checking on the internet was easier said than done. But is that really all there is to this pasta? Was it just a popular story about an under-highway cave, made by a dude with an overactive imagination? In 2004, a story entitled The Fear of Darkness by Thomas Lara made its rounds online. The story was similar to Ted the Caver's blog posts, and supposedly took place between 1987 and 2004. Because of the similarities to Ted's posts, along with the huge potential timeline, people on the NSS board began to believe that this story was the original tale of the mystery cave. Essentially, they thought Ted ripped it off. In January of 2005, however, Ted made his own thread on the board and defended his work, saying it was completely original. He went on to outline how it was actually parts of Lara's work that ripped his posts off. So Ted pretty much owned the haters. From what I am gathering, it doesn't seem like this story was ever really debunked, though. Perhaps Ted made it all up, Perhaps he was just hearing highway noises. No one really can know for sure. What can be inferred, however, is that at the very least, Ted was A-OK after his final cave visit, considering he showed up on the NSS board around 4 years after the ending post to speak with people. Yes, that's right. This is one of those creepypastas that got a film adaptation. Living Dark, the story of tedthecaver, was released in 2008 by independent filmmaker David Hunt. In 2009, it was shown at several film festivals, including Moondance and Indie Memphis. The rights to the film were sold to New Films International in 2011. You can apparently watch a trailer on their website. I don't know if it's still up though. This is just according to Know Your Meme. The movie has a 5.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb, with 734 votes, if that matters to anyone. According to one of the reviews I read, the story deviates quite significantly from the original pasta, and personally, that's a no-no for me. So what a surprise, another creepypasta movie that probably missed the mark. There has been a slight change of plans. For the sake of keeping this video at a watchable length, I will not be reading the entirety of Ted's blog. His posts contain well over an hour of reading, and I highly recommend anyone who is interested check them out. For now, I will summarize the scary portions of his journal and will read his final post. The lead up to this cliffhanger of a post was very verbose and mostly consisted of Ted talking about how he and his friend, called B in the journal, found an unexplored portion of Mystery Cave, and were working to widen the entrance and explore it. Eventually, they successfully opened a hole big enough for Ted and another caver to explore. A summation of the journal entries is as follows. The duo heard a mysterious rumbling from deep within the new area, present throughout most of their time working and exploring, but randomly disappearing at times. B's dog freaked out when they brought it near the new passage, they now called Floyd's tomb, and refused to enter it. They both heard occasional scraping sounds and rock slides while working, emanating from deep within the Virgin Passage, beyond Floyd's tomb. At some point, they heard what sounded like a loud shriek coming from the very far end of the unexplored depths. Ted estimated it must have been about 100 feet away from where they heard it. When he was finally able to squeeze beyond the tomb himself and explore, he found weird hieroglyphics and felt a weird sense of tension while exploring. Many of the photos he tried taking while deep inside did not show up on camera. B and Ted eventually convinced a smaller caver, they called Joe in the journal, to explore further past Floyd's tomb, who came back traumatized and feeling sick. Ted and B returned to the cave, resolved to fully explore beyond the tomb, and Ted went in with a corded phone to stay in contact with B. Here's a basic summary of this trek far past Floyd's tomb. At some point deep in the cave, Ted heard a scraping noise from behind him in a large empty section and jumped up, breaking his headlamp on the ceiling. He had to use glow sticks and a dying mini-mag to travel back towards Floyd's tomb. On the way back, something moved a large rock onto the phone wire, which he heard as a scraping noise. This snapped the wire, making the phone useless. Ted found a deep tunnel that used to be behind the large rock, leading a 45-degree angle downward, and he was too terrified to enter it. He turned away from the hole and had a sudden burst of terror and rushed back to Floyd's tomb. As he was squeezing through, a breeze came from behind him that smelled rank and like putrid death. As Ted and B were rushing to leave the cave, something tried to pull Ted's climbing rope downward back in. That's pretty much the gist of all the weird crap leading up to Ted's final post, which is entirely a reflection in between cave visits. He never did write another entry after that, however, so his last trip is a mystery to this day. Anyway, on to the finale. May 19th, 2001. It has been 3 weeks since our last visit to the cave. I want to update everyone as to my condition, my plans for the cave, and the events of the past few weeks. I apologize for not returning your phone calls. I have been getting all of your messages. I just haven't felt up to calling back. Steve and Mark, Thanks for your words of encouragement on my answering machine. I know you two are sincerely concerned for me. You are awesome friends. Mark, I know you stopped by the house a few times, and I'm sorry I never answered the door. It really helped me just knowing you dropped by. Sis, I can hear the worry in your voice. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Just take care of those nieces and nephews of mine. I figure if I can get this site updated, I can let everyone know at once about how I am doing. A lot has happened in the last 3 weeks, so I'll do my best to cover everything. I guess I should start where the last entry left off. It took several days to get the last journal entry written down. I was so shook up from the experience that I could do little else but sit around and ponder what had happened. Right now, I am on long-term medical leave from work. I tried to go to work several days after the event, but my boss sent me home. I couldn't concentrate and I looked terrible. I've even been to the doctor, but I couldn't tell him about the experience, so I just told him I was under a lot of stress. He recommended rest and gave me a prescription to help me. Good drugs. When we left the cave, I was nearly in a state of shock. I could not think clearly and was having a difficult time trying to understand what had happened. I didn't eat much, nor did I get any sleep. I was glad I had the presence of mind to write down my experience while it was fresh in my mind. As I reread what I wrote, I feel like I accurately portrayed what happened in the cave that day. I wouldn't change anything I wrote. Even though it took 3 days to write it, when I finished writing in my journal, I felt much better. I guess it was kind of therapeutic. Unfortunately, it didn't last. In fact, it was after that things got really bad. B and I parted company after the trip, and I didn't see him again until yesterday. I didn't try to reach him, and he didn't try to get a hold of me. Nor did either of us try to contact Joe. B just dropped me off after the trip, and I spent the next several days by myself in the house. I tried to eat, but had no appetite. I was restless, but I couldn't find anything to do to take my mind off the experience. That's when I determined that I should write it down. As I mentioned, that helped me think a little clearer, and I seemed to be a little calmer, but it didn't last. I went to work the next day, but was sent home. The day after that, I had an overwhelming feeling of anxiety sink into my soul. I was depressed and confused, and I had no one I wanted to turn to for comfort. I was getting all kinds of phone calls from people, but I just let the answering machine take the calls. I even changed the message on the machine to let everyone know I was alright. I continued in this miserable state, eating and sleeping whenever I could manage, until a week after the trip. Then things started to get strange. At first, I was hearing sounds in the house that had no explanation. Footsteps, shuffling noises, creaking doors. You know, the typical horror movie fare. Only the sounds were not distinct. It was as though I wasn't sure I heard what I thought I heard. I would be eating or getting out of the shower and stop, thinking I heard something, but the sound would not repeat itself. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that it had happened frequently, I couldn't be sure there were noises in the first place. Either way, I was scared. It was as though I had been caught in a spiderweb for the last week. Feelings of anxiety, foreboding, and tension filled my life. Then came the hallucinations. I began seeing things in a manner similar to the sounds I was hearing. Just a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. When I would turn to look, nothing. I had been sleeping with the lights on in my room, but now I kept all the lights in the house on from before dusk to after dawn. When I started to see the things on a regular basis, I purchased a gun. Got it from an ad in the paper, so I didn't have to wait for a permit. I went to the doctor, but I didn't mention the details of my life. Just told him I couldn't relax, and I walked out of there with a prescription. Fortunately, my wounds and injuries were pretty much healed by this time. My back still hurt a little, but the prescription took care of that, too. When I was on the medication, I felt great, but I didn't want to walk around high the rest of my life, so I would only take it at the end of a tough day. Unfortunately, the severity of the sightings increased, giving rise to the need for a medication. The flashes in the corner of my eye continued, but then I began to see shapes and shadows. They would be outside my windows, usually at night. I still couldn't make out anything solid, so it was hard to pin down what I was seeing. Soon, I began to close all of my drapes and blinds so I could remove the possibilities of seeing something. Doing so did help in that respect, but my life was still a mess. My daily routine was mechanical and empty. I would sleep in as long as I could, usually out of exhaustion. Then I would get cleaned up and try to eat something. I lost a lot of weight, so I tried to get as much possible down me. Then I would exercise a little and nap a lot. I'd only been out of the house a few times in the last 2 weeks. The store, the doctor, the gun purchase. I didn't watch much TV because I couldn't concentrate. I spent a lot of time on the internet. I was doing research on caves and cave myths. The only story I could find was the caver folklore about the hodag. The hodag is supposedly a creature that roams caves. 2 weeks after we went into the cave, and a week after, I began hearing things. I began to have nightmares. Extremely lucid nightmares. No specific theme or recurring events, just plain terrifying. Sometimes I was in my house and someone was trying to get me, only I couldn't run because I had no legs. Other times, I was in a vat and someone was pouring a syrup-like liquid on me, filling the vat. I would wake up in a panic. I would stay awake until exhaustion forced me to enter dreamland once again. A brutal routine. It continued for several days until it reached a climax on the 6th day, yesterday. My dream seemed so real I had a hard time telling if I was awake or not. I was beat, really drained of energy and spirit. I was going from the living room to my bedroom in the early evening when I looked down at the hall and saw a dark figure toward the end. I thought it was a thief and began to back up slowly. It didn't move. As I was backing up, the lights flickered off and on. Every muscle was tense. I stopped to stare at the figure. Just then, the phone rang. It startled me so bad I stumbled over the chair. When I got up, I wheeled around to look down the hall and nothing was there. I grabbed my keys and left the house. I felt compelled to go in my car and drive. My pulse pounded in my temples as I got in and started the car. I wanted to drive to Overlook Point to see the city lights. I didn't know why I needed to go there, but I knew I had to go. The closer I got, the more urgent the feeling. When I arrived at the point, I saw something that at first startled me, but then caused me to be more relaxed than I had been in a long time. Joe was there. He was out of his car, standing looking at the lights. We looked at each other. I could see from the tired look on his face, he had been going through the same miserable trial that I had been experiencing. You could tell from the look on my face that we shared some terrible experience. Our conversation was unbelievably brief. "You been back?" he began, even though he knew the answer. "Yes, we need to return." "Tomorrow good?" I asked. "Yeah, noon." He got in his car and I got into mine. I hadn't even wanted to talk to him about his experience. Obviously, he didn't want to know mine. I drove over to B's house. When he answered the door, I thought B actually looked like he was doing fine, somewhat happy. One look at me and his disposition changed. Our conversation was also succinct. I ran into Joe, and we're going back tomorrow at noon. B looked dead serious. He just nodded his head. I asked him if I could spend the night at his house. He eagerly let me in. I didn't notice until later, but every light in the house was turned on. He led me to his spare room. "Help yourself." "Thanks." I washed up in the bathroom, took some medication, and got the first decent sleep in a long time. I awoke early this morning and came home to get ready for the trip. I thought I would send out this update so no one will wonder what's going on with me. I suspect that by the time most of you read this, I will be back home and will have a great story to tell. I promise that if you haven't heard from me by now, you will very shortly. It is now 10 a.m. on Saturday the 19th. We will be leaving for the cave in 2 hours. Preparing for this trip will be like no other trip I've been on. For the first time in my life, I will carry a gun into a cave. I will also carry a knife, an extensive first aid kit, plenty of food and water, and a camera. I will take several sources of light, and a pad of paper and pencil. I will have to take all of my climbing rope, since B lost his in the cave. I will carry a good length of rope with me on the other side of Floyd's tomb. This is the first time in 3 weeks that I have heard any reference to Floyd's tomb. It sent shivers up my spine just typing it. There are so many things I hope to accomplish this day, so many answers I hope to find in a tiny passage hidden from view. Reflecting on the events leading up to today leaves me feeling dizzy. Was this all a bad dream? Unfortunately, I am wide awake, and still, in a few short hours I might face my nightmare. The thought of having another person with me in the passage does nothing to alleviate the fear I feel. I almost chuckle as I ponder a childish notion that we will have to consider. Who will enter the tomb first? Who will lead the way into the dark unknown? Who will decide when to turn back? Foremost among the questions in my mind is, what about the video camera I left behind? It is supposed to be able to record in complete darkness. I left the thing running, so what might we find on the tape? Darker questions follow. What if the camera is gone? What if it is destroyed? Although it is difficult to put an exact name on my motivation, I think closure fits quite nicely. I need to find out a few things about this cave. The main thing, believe it or not, is to find the end of the cave. With all the bizarre things I have witnessed there these past few weeks, it would seem a bit trite to want, as a primary goal, to get to the end, but that is what I want. To be sure, I will be seeking other bits of knowledge along the way. If, however, I find the end to the main passage, and an end to the passage hidden by the rock, I will be more content to never return to the passage or the cave again. Never. It would seem to me that crawling headfirst through a tight passage into the darkness is an unnatural thing. Just like crawling up the side of a cliff for recreation, or jumping out of a perfectly good airplane and floating to the ground. We do these things to satisfy our hunger for adventure, this subconscious desire to conquer our own little Everest. As B is fond of saying, caving is the last opportunity for exploration for the person with modest means. True. Just a short drive from just about anywhere in the country is a cave waiting to be explored. Even a cave well known among the general public can be approached by someone for the first time as an adventure, something new, something to overcome, because it's there. Many of you don't agree with my decisions to pursue this cave. I know this from the messages I have received. I'm afraid I don't have a choice. If I am ever to experience restful slumber, I must return. If I am ever to walk the halls of my own home in peace, I must return. If I am ever to exit the overworld and enter the subterranean world of a cave, I must now return. I no longer feel that I have a choice. I must return. For my family and friends who are reading this, I say, be at peace. I will conquer this cave. Then I will return and update this website immediately. I will include any photos we take in the cave today, and if you stop by the house, I will show you the video I will have. I expect to be home later tonight, or tomorrow at the latest. See all of you soon, with a lot of answers. Love, Ted. And that was the last post he ever made on this site. Though he did show up, as I said earlier in this video, in 2005 on a different board, defending his story as not being a ripoff of somebody else's. So clearly the guy's still alive. I don't know what happened. Maybe he just didn't feel like making the last part. Maybe this whole thing was just made up. Who knows? They have pictures, so I don't think it's made up. I don't know why he never made an ending part, but that's it. That was the final entry of his journal. This was a long one, so I'm going to make my rating short and sweet. In terms of horror factor, to me, this has to be one of those need-to-be-there situations. Reading this didn't scare me too bad, but I know for a fact I'd be disturbed beyond comprehension if I ever went to a cave like this. But this is not something that will keep me up at night after reading alone. So, I'll compromise my conflicting thoughts and give 3 out of 5 spooky, scary skeletons. For realism, this was literally a series of blog posts covering the journal of a dude exploring a cave. It doesn't get more real than that. Because of the implications of the paranormal here, and the fact that Ted got a little weird with claims towards the end, however, I am going to deduct a skeleton from my rating. I just think the hallucinations and dreams part of the pasta took away from the initial horror of the cave itself. Therefore, I give 4 skeletons out of 5 for realism. Similar to Ben Drowned, this is a great story for mystery, especially since there was never any real conclusion to the authenticity of it. It seems like, at the very least, Ted himself believes something paranormal was afoot in the mystery cave. I am, however, going to deduct half a skeleton, as I am not the biggest fan of lazy cliffhangers that weren't meant to be there, like at the end of this story. So 4.5 skeletons out of 5. Finally, for depth, this was another creepypasta that fits into a particular niche. I didn't even know about this one myself until fairly recently. If you were into caving and spent a decent amount of time on the internet back in the day, I'm sure you would know who Ted the Caver was. However, in modern day, I feel like this story is reduced to a brief mention in the occasional scary unexplained stories video on YouTube. And there is also the mediocre movie as well. So we have a bunch of forum posts spanning from 2004 to 2011, a couple mentions in various YouTube videos, and a so-so movie that deviates from the original tale. 3 out of 5 skeletons. That's what I'm going with. These ratings leave us with a 14.5 out of 20, or 72.5%. Honestly, I think a C is a little high for this one, but my mystery rating is really boosting it up. I don't want to budge on that one though. This one is just as mysterious, if not more, than Ben Drowned, which also received a pretty good mystery rating. This is what I'd expect from a mystery creepypasta, so the rating stands. And that's a wrap, everyone. The story crafted by Ted, known as Ted the Caver, is certainly an immense and dedicated tale with a decent amount of horror elements sprinkled throughout. I have a lot of respect for it, especially since it seems to be based on a real adventure. However, I do believe this story better serves as a mystery or exploration tale, rather than as a creepypasta. Still, it did get a C by my ratings, so I can't complain too much. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Leave me a like and throw a subscription my way if you haven't already. Check out my channel to see my ever-growing list of videos, including more creepypasta content. With all of that being said, everyone, stay tuned, and certainly stay out of deep, dark caves.